The Gospel of Gold by G.S. Lewis. Morty began pacing back and forth, clearly agitated, chewing his thumbnail. "I don't get all this," he groaned. "Why does your silver hate us so much?" Gold was about to answer when he heard Lance's voice. "Didn't you hear me, Morty? Think, if the trends of society continue as they are now, how will it be in, say, 50 years? Or 100 if it lasts? I am not a long-lived psychic creature who can see into the future, but I can see where this is going. It's why I ultimately broke from the Johto League, and now take these preemptive measures. This silver does not hate without reason." Once again, Gold saw images flash in his mind, this time of broken Pokemon bodies. There were the brutalized Bayleaf and Flaffy from early in his journey, the tailless Slowpoke, the broken neck Machop, and others. He shook his head to clear it. "Silver's partially right," Gold admitted, "but he's given in to despair. That's the difference between him and Spirit. He wants us destroyed as punishment. She holds out hope that we can be redeemed." There was a moment's silence as the three of them considered the words. Gold himself hadn't known to say them. "He spoke to Apollo," Lance said suddenly. "He must have." They looked at the screen again. The rocket commander remained seated and tied, and so expressionless that only the faint rise and fall of his chest indicated life. "He hates Team Rocket more than me," Gold murmured. "They caged him in his youth." "Then what could he have to say to their current leader?" wondered Morty. "What now, of all times, if he could have addressed him at any time anyway?" "Is it a continued conversation, perhaps?" suggested Lance. "I don't think so," said Gold, shaking his head. "Archer looked too surprised for that. Besides, Silver finds it almost insufferable talking to any human. The only reason he'd make an exception for Archer is... yeah, it's got to be that strange signal wave he invented. It messes with his powers." Morty looked at him with confusion. "Signal wave?" he prompted. "An artificial inducer to force Pokemon evolution en masse," Lance filled in quickly. He turned to Gold with an eyebrow raised. "But you're suggesting it has side effects? The more answers I get, the more questions I have." Morty slumped wearily. "It's worse for me. I've only got a small piece of the picture." Lance frowned. "I wish we had more time to share. Unfortunately, the Johto League is moving. Ho-oh said she needed some time alone, and I think I'll follow her example." He turned to Gold with an apologetic smile. "Go ahead home and see your father. I've kept you too long already." Gold nodded agreeably at the idea, and had just taken his first step out when Morty stopped him. Your dad's not at your house. It's been declared too hazardous for habitation," came the gym leader's voice with a note of apology. "But you may find him at the local Pokemon Center." Momentarily crestfallen, Gold perked up again at that. "You've seen him?" he asked excitedly. "Just yesterday," Morty affirmed. "Not half an hour after you swept off on the Phoenix's back. When things had calmed down a bit, I answered for him what I could, which wasn't much. I'm sure you could fill in the details more thoroughly." Morty pointed in the direction Gold should take. "Since it'll likely be your new residence as well, at least until your house is fixed, I should mention that it's become a bit of a refuge shelter. You'll likely be sharing living spaces with out-of-town trainers, and that one guy who left Team Rocket. If you want, you're both welcome to my house." "Thank you, but that's okay." Gold lingered only long enough to ask one more question. Master Lance, you'll help Jinichi, won't you? I'll do everything I can, vowed the champion. I mean it. Ecruteak Pokemon Center sat strategically near the south entrance of the city, where trainers usually came in from their journeys. Gold knew the way from years past, when he would spend the beginnings of each summer watching Morty's challengers steadily stream through, always stopping first to rest. It was a convenient indicator that an exciting match was imminent, if one knew Morty's gym hours. As Gold walked, he idly wondered if any visiting Pokemon trainers would be at the Pokemon Center now. Alan had mentioned that his group, the Ecruteak representatives, had traveled far quicker than all the others. Furthermore, groups like the Violet City Trio were taking unorthodox detours to make themselves more competitive matches for the gym challenge. Would they be here now? Would it be a group that started after Ecruteaks, like the Mahogany Town trainers? Would any of them have even gotten so far? As Gold rounded the corner to the Pokemon Center, his thoughts were abruptly halted and forgotten. His breath caught in his throat, and he stared with surprise and horror at the figure sitting on the steps just outside the doors. Before he could stop himself, he blurted out the first thing that came to his unwary mind. Silver! The red-headed boy, who had become aware of him at the same moment, jumped at hearing the name like a startled rabbit. Gold saw his mistake then, for such a sudden fright had never shown in Silver's eyes, nor indeed were the eyes even silver-colored. They were a light shade of brown, tinged almost to a crimson hue, so that they matched the mane that draped around his shoulders. Not Silver, he whispered, as if afraid to speak the name too loudly, lest it be overheard. I'm Kamen! Gold relaxed. This boy had driven Cyndaquil to his death, but he was a lesser evil compared to the entity he'd housed until recently. In fact, this marked the first time Gold had ever encountered Kamen while both boys were in their right minds. They were long overdue for a talk. Kamen, said Gold, uncertain how to feel. He thought he would be angry, but Kamen's sitting posture just a moment ago had seemed forlorn, sad. He'd had his knees tucked up to his chest and his arms wrapped around them. Now, Kamen lay sprawled backwards, propped up on one elbow, like he'd been smacked to the ground and anticipated a beating. The impression, false or otherwise, took Gold off guard, and he wondered what to say. What came out was, "What are you doing here?" Kamen's eyes flicked over Gold's shoulder, off into the distant west, from which the faintest whiff of the sea sometimes drifted. His eyes met Gold's again, and he threw up a hand. "Don't come any closer!" Gold regarded him with confusion, and checked behind himself to see if something was there. Sensing nothing, he returned his attention to Kamen. "Who, me?" "Yes! Stay back! He comes whenever you show up!" Kamen scrambled back to his feet and backed up the steps to the Pokemon Center's double doors. In spite of his warning, Gold pursued him a few steps, holding out his hand for the redhead to wait. "Hold up! Where are you going?" "Back into hiding!" Kamen gasped as he stumbled on a step. "I knew I never should have come out. He can't get me as long as I stay in this city. But if you're here..." The hiss of the Pokecenter's automatic doors issued behind him, and Kamen tore his gaze away, leaping through. By the time Gold bounded up the steps and reached the lobby inside, the other boy was nowhere to be seen. That could have gone better, Gold thought with disappointment. As a matter of speculation, the conversation could have gone 100 ways. Gold might have learned something of Kamen, how he had managed to acquire Cyndaquil, why he had been inclined to fight so ruthlessly, how Silver had taken hold of him, what he meant to do if given the chance, and so on. There was much to ask, and he probably could still ask, though without much hope of any answers. One thing is clear, though, thought Gold. Kamen knows not to leave Ekrotik.